All right, so when you hear the name Albert Einstein, you immediately picture the ultimate genius, right? I mean, the legendary physicist who completely flipped our understanding of the universe on its head. But what if I told you that this very same icon was once an unemployed, wandering graduate who got rejected by pretty much everyone and was literally labeled useless? And even more wild, what if I told you that this completely unemployable underdog was later offered the leadership of an entire nation? Seriously, how does a guy go from not being able to land a basic teaching gig to being asked to be a president? Well, let's dive into this unbelievable journey in today's Explainer.
So let's look at this wild central irony we've got here. On one hand, you've got a young boy who is genuinely written off as a slow learner by his own teachers. Born in Germany in 1879, little Albert actually didn't even start speaking until quite late, and his teachers basically figured he was just a weak, average student. Why? Because of his incredible, innate curiosity. In those super strict, discipline-heavy German schools back in Munich, if he didn't grasp something intuitively, he just flat-out refused to memorize it by rote. He'd obsess over the underlying concepts instead, which constantly put him behind all his classmates. Then, on the other hand, you have the global icon who would one day be offered the presidency of Israel. I mean, the gap between these two realities is just totally astounding.
Part 1. The Useless Student.
Frustrated with that rigid school system in Munich, Einstein actually dropped out and moved with his family to Switzerland. He was really hoping for a more liberal education, so he applied to the prestigious Zurich Polytechnic College. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly who he was. During the entrance exam, he completely aced the math and physics sections, just finished them instantly. But geology, literature, and politics, he utterly bombed them. Because those subjects required rote memorization, which he naturally, almost instinctively rejected. The college professors were absolutely stunned by his math skills, but they still told him, sorry, you can't get in. His stubborn refusal to play by traditional academic rules meant he had to spend an entire extra year in a secondary school just to pass those memorization-heavy subjects.
Moving right along to Part 2. Rejection and Despair.
Okay, so Einstein eventually gets into college and graduates in the year 1900. But because he was always skipping the boring lectures to just study whatever he wanted on his own, and because he refused to butter up his professors, graduation day rolls around and they absolutely refuse to write him any job recommendations. And in the scientific world back then, without a professor backing you, you were a nobody. Which leads us to this massive number, 9. 9 agonizing years. That is how long Albert Einstein spent wandering around after graduation without a formal academic job. While all his peers were landing these cushy university positions, Einstein was left totally in the dust. He applied to places all over Germany and Switzerland, and the answer was literally always the same. We're sorry, but we cannot hire you.
And you can really see the toll this took. His personal diary captures this profound, heavy despair. He wrote, "It seems as if the world has no use for me. Every door feels closed." I really want you to sit with that for a second. The man whose mind would eventually unlock the secrets of the cosmos felt entirely discarded by humanity. This constant stream of rejection just crushed his spirit. He knew he had incredible potential, right? But absolutely no one in the academic establishment was willing to give him a single chance.
And he echoed this exact same feeling in a letter to his classmate and girlfriend, Mileva. He wrote, "I feel I have become a useless person. The world only listens to those who fit in their system." His stubborn idealism, his absolute need to only work in science, was violently colliding with harsh reality. The financial pressure on him was immense. He wanted to marry Mileva, but he just couldn't afford it. So just to survive, the greatest mind of the 20th century had to take odd jobs working as a private tutor, teaching math to school kids just to scrape by.
Which brings us to Part 3, the Patent Office Miracle.
With his hands completely tied financially, a buddy of his finally gave him a crucial piece of advice. He basically said, look, you've got to settle. Stop chasing this prestigious university dream and just apply for a low-level government gig so you can survive. So in 1902, Einstein becomes a third-class examiner at the Bern Patent Office. His day-to-day job? Checking patent applications for new inventions to figure out if they were actually innovative. On paper, this was an incredibly boring, mundane 9-to-5 desk job. But it finally gave him a steady paycheck. For the first time, he actually had some financial stability. And the best part? Because he clocked out right at 5 p.m. every day, his nights and his weekends were completely free. He could finally relentlessly pursue his own independent scientific research.
Working quietly away at that patent office, Einstein unleashed the year 1905, which is now famously known as his miracle year. In one single year, he published 4 totally revolutionary papers. We're talking special relativity, the photoelectric effect, Brownian motion, and mass energy equivalence, which gave us the ridiculously famous equation E=mc². I mean, he literally shook the foundations of quantum physics in space-time, fundamentally changing how we understand the universe. And he did all of it while sitting at a desk working as a low-level patent clerk. Just incredible.
So mapping out this unbelievable ascent really puts things in perspective. He graduates in 1900, totally unrecommended, settles for the patent office gig in 1902, shocks the entire world with those 4 papers in 1905, and then, finally, in 1909, a full 9 years after he graduated, he's finally offered a role as an assistant professor at the University of Zurich. The guy the system completely rejected ended up forcing that very system to acknowledge him.
Part 4. An unexpected presidential offer.
Let's fast forward a bit. By the 1930s, Einstein's life had completely transformed. Just before Hitler took power in Germany, Einstein managed to escape and relocated to the United States. He settled down as a revered professor of theoretical physics in Princeton, New Jersey. He had really evolved into this beloved global cultural icon and a highly respected face of the international Jewish community. Which poses a pretty dramatic question. What happens when the man no one wanted to hire is suddenly asked to lead a nation? We're pivoting right now from the realm of quantum physics straight into international geopolitics.
So to really understand this, we need a quick bit of historical context. In 1948, the State of Israel was formally established. But just 4 years later, in November 1952, Israel's very first president, Chaim Weizmann, passed away. And this created a sudden, massive leadership vacuum. The Zionist leaders of the newly formed state were desperately looking for a unifying figurehead, and they came up with this wildly ambitious idea. Hey, why not offer the presidency to the most famous, most highly respected Jewish icon on the planet?
So, on November 17, 1952, a formal letter lands on Einstein's desk. It was sent by Abba Eban, who was the Israeli ambassador to the UN, and it carried a message straight from Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion. And the proposition was massive. They were asking him to relocate to Israel, take on Israeli citizenship, and assume the presidency. And to sweeten the deal, they promised him total freedom and all the facilities he'd need to just keep doing his scientific work without any interruptions. It was an incredibly emotional, monumental offer of power and prestige, especially for a 73-year-old man.
And that leads us to Part 5. A principled refusal.
Now, you might expect a guy whose early life was totally defined by rejection and powerlessness to jump at the ultimate validation, right? To be tempted by the chance to actually run a country. But his response was immediate and deeply, deeply humble. He wrote back saying he was profoundly moved, but he had to decline. His reasoning? He wrote, "I lack both the natural aptitude and the experience to deal properly with people and to exercise official functions." See, Einstein knew exactly who he was. He stated that his entire life had been dedicated to objective scientific matters. He simply didn't have the nature or the experience to navigate all the messy, subjective complexities of human politics.
But beneath that practical, polite refusal was actually a deep moral dread of holding political power. It was really a refusal to put himself in situations where government decisions might clash with his own strict personal conscience. He knew that politics, by its very nature, requires compromise. And Einstein, he was a man who, as a stubborn student, absolutely refused to compromise his way of learning. And now, as a 73-year-old man, he absolutely refused to compromise his inner moral compass, no matter how much honor they were throwing at him.
Now, there's a really fascinating historical footnote to all of this. While the general public was incredibly excited by the idea of President Einstein, the political reality behind closed doors was a lot more complex. Einstein was certainly sympathetic to the Jewish people, for sure, but he was never actually a passionate Zionist. In fact, historical records show that Prime Minister Ben-Gurion was secretly pretty relieved when Einstein said no. Ben-Gurion's aides even noted that having Einstein as president would have been a huge headache for the state. Because, back in 1946, Einstein had explicitly told an international committee that the idea of a separate state was not in his heart. They fundamentally misaligned on the whole concept of statehood, which honestly made his refusal a huge relief for both sides. So we've seen Einstein go from a totally dismissed student through a decade of absolute despair to literally rewriting the laws of physics and finally turning down the presidency of a nation. And it leaves us with this final, really powerful question to think about. Are you willing to say no to ultimate power just to stay true to your own conscience? Einstein's legacy isn't just about the speed of light or gravity. It's a testament to the immense power of knowing exactly who you are, what you value, and never letting the world's systems, whether they're completely rejecting you or trying to crown you, change your core principles.